Good morning to everyone joining us from here in Australia and across the globe. I am Tanya Arlington, Event Director at Workplace Wellness Festival, and we're incredibly excited to be bringing you this webinar off the back of a hugely successful festival held in June earlier this year. I would like to begin with Acknowledgement of Country by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast this event. I would also like to pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. After the wrap-up of Workplace Wellness Festival 2021, one of the recurring themes from participants was that of wanting to understand how far we think mental well-being will go in the workplace. Where does it start? Where does it stop? What should it include? And what is an individual versus a workplace's responsibility? AIA Vitality and workplace wellbeing platform Mentemia have collaborated to bring together some brilliant minds to discuss and debate this topic with you today. This 1-hour session will leave you informed and inspired with real-life stories and examples to take back to your workplace. First to the stage, I'm extremely pleased to welcome AIA Australia's CEO and Managing Director, Damien. Damien, an absolute pleasure to have you back on stage with us today, and I'll now hand over to you for opening remarks and to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Tanya, and great to be here at the follow-up from the Workplace Wellness Festival, where I had the privilege of and great to see the recurring themes and questions being asked by people, because this is such an important one, thinking about where does it stop, where does it start in regards to mental wellbeing in the workplace. So we're going to hear from some fantastic speakers today, and I'm very pleased that AIA Vitality and Mentemia were able to support this panel coming together. But firstly, welcome and wishing everyone well wherever you are. Obviously, if you're in Australia, we've got another significant issue and challenge on our hand around different states, and those in Sydney in lockdown, in Queensland, New South Wales, I should say, in Queensland. Thoughts are with you. I'm in Victoria, so I've been through 5 lockdowns now, and I guess more importantly, what it does do is remind us continually about the importance of mental wellbeing. And as the CEO, whether that's Chief Executive Officer or Chief Entertainment Officer of AIA, we've got 3,000 family members across ANZ, and it's a reminder to me how important it is that we continue to stay connected, look at how we are supporting our family members to stay both physically and mentally well during this time. It's been challenging each time we go into a lockdown, and now as our Sydney team faces it. But some of the things we did was, as I might have mentioned in other forums, we had our Survive, Revive, Thrive plan, and we really connected to the emotion of what was going on from the start of COVID, where we just looked to survive, and then how we were going to revive, and then as we look to try and thrive into the future. And I think the Workplace Wellness Festival had some fantastic speakers and presenters about how we can thrive in the workplace post COVID-19 and into the future, as expectations of what an employer and an organisation needs to do to help their employees be the best that they can be. And obviously, it's a shared value model there. It's a win-win. So thanks again to the Workplace Wellness Festival for the opportunity to be here today. Thanks to, obviously, to Mentemia, our partners, one of our important partners who helped us during COVID to give Mentemia free out to all Australians, and now, looking at how we can get to the workplaces to support employers and employees thrive as well. And it's my privilege to introduce the speakers today and then hand over to Alex Kenning, who will be facilitating. So firstly, we've got Linda Ray. Linda is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Neurocapability, co-founder of Conductor Software, co-founder, Institute of Organisational Neuroscience. In 2006, Linda Ray began a mission to change the world one brain at a time, and her work focused on exploring how neuroscience, the inner working of the brain and the nervous system, affects workers' performance and psychological safety. And to help foster the workplace and higher workplace productivity, Linda developed the world's only accredited curriculum in neuroscience of leadership, which has been delivered to students across the globe. A 300-strong alumni have joined her on the mission to change the world one brain at a time. So it'd be great to hear from Linda. We have Nia Nguyen Lee. Nia is the Director, Strategic Business Performance, Office of the Chief Executive for the New South Wales Land Housing Corporation. A senior leader and mentor with 13 years of experience in strategy, project, program and operational management. and in human services advocacy in the New South Wales public sector and not-for-profit sector. Nia has a passion for delivering humanitarian initiatives and has, for a number of years, done pro bono work for refugees and other disadvantaged communities in Africa, India, Vietnam, and in Australia. We also have joined Linda and Nia, Dave Wilson. Dave is someone who constantly searches for the greatest thing and asks, how do we come up with new ideas before we actually need them? And so Dave Wilson was tapped to lead CISCO's Internet of Things global sales organisation in 2019, and prior to this role, Dave was CISCO's country director in New Zealand, where he transformed the culture of the team, built significant growth, and guided customer and partner relationships. Not only is he recognised as a visionary, an influencer in the global information and community technology industry, but a passionate advocate for diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace. And we have also from the AIA Vitality team joining the panel, Danielle Williams. And Danielle is Senior Manager for Vitality Partnerships and Distribution, and is a huge advocate for workplace wellbeing, mental wellbeing. And in this role, she has responsibility for distribution, launch and management by AIA Vitality with our corporate partners, our wellness program. And Danny has worked in disease prevention industry for over 20 years. So he spent time with Vitality either in the UK and then unfortunately with me in the team here in Australia. And constantly focused on motivating corporate populations to change their behaviour around modifiable risk factors like physical activity and mental health hygiene. And she has a passion for corporate health and has recently applied that passion to mental fitness in the workplace. So great to see Danny on the panel as well. So we've got a fantastic panel, and I'm about to just introduce our facilitator moderator today, tap into these brilliant people's thoughts and insights that we can all learn from, and that's Alex Kenny. And Alex has been Managing Director of Acknowledgement Australia since 2019, after originally done at the global recruitment and justice firm in 2010. Talent acquisition, talent retention, and workplace solutions are board discussions in almost every organisation, and Alex has a proven track record in helping clients access the very best digital talent, working across a broad range of industries, and as the host of Aquen's incredibly popular DigiTalk series. Alex brings a perspective as facilitators for this webinar. So again, you've got a fantastic panel. It's going to be an awesome discussion, and I'm going to hand over to Alex to guide you through it. So thanks everyone for the session.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, just to echo that, we have got a fantastic panel, and I'm absolutely honoured to steer the discussion and the debate today, all about workplace mental well-being. Where does it stop? Now, before I jump in, just a couple of housekeeping issues and how this is going to work. We're going to have a 30 to 35 minute Q&A where I'll lead the questions from there, but we are leaving 10 to 15 minutes at the end where we want to answer some of your questions. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you have a chat box. So please do enter any questions that you've got throughout the discussion. And then at the end, I'll be scrolling through to pick out some to answer. Now, workplace mental well-being and where it stops. It was a common theme bubbling out of many sessions during the Workplace Wellness Festival. Many comments talked to it. Some people were concerned that workplace responsibilities didn't go far enough and were moving too slowly. Others wanting it to go further and to progress quicker. And then there were others still who were completely cynical about the role of an organisation in mental well-being, full stop. So Dave, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. You've been a huge advocate for diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace, and I know you've achieved some great things in the space at CISCO. So why do you think this topic about where the role of a workplace in mental well-being stops is on so many people's minds at the moment, and is it here to stay?
Well, yes, I believe it's here to stay. And I think you can't go past, obviously, the time and place we are as a world, as a society, as a community, to say, why is it front and center right now? I know about most of you, but there isn't a person I don't talk with at work or around a barbecue that isn't talking about some new form of awareness or consciousness that they've come to through this phase, and that may look like a lot of different shapes or forms, but aware that they maybe have been doing something they haven't enjoyed for the last 5 years, or just something about themselves is just this seems to be this awakening of the world of where they are at in this place and time. So I think that's heightened things as more and more people come to this form of awareness. For workplace, I think we've been struggling for a long time to figure out the next evolve of performance. How do you innovate? How do you become more creative? Because we know we can't work harder, we can't even work smarter. And I think, at least for us at CISCO, we would like to say we focus on pushing for a growth mindset. What we have learned is you can't have a growth mindset or just turn up and tell someone to have a growth mindset one day, or magically discover hidden or lost creative or innovative skills. And as much as you can train people on how to be creative and innovative, again, if you're not looking after self or teaching people about the mind, and typically fear and where fear plays a part, and that we all go through different phases of fear or perception of fear. If you don't remove fear from the workplace, which or from your life more so, you can't be all these things. You can't tap into your innovative, creative self. You can't, as a company, have a collective growth mindset. So for me, it's super critical right now that we look at these things and help the people understand where they're at. And if they are feeling fearful, stressed, or anxious, how do you overcome that? Because it's not something you can overcome without training.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Dave. And Nia, I'll come to you next. What are your thoughts? Why do you think it is such a hot topic? And I guess, is it being questioned and examined in the public and not-for-profit sector where you have so much expertise as what it is across all other industries?
Sure. So from my experience, the increased need for these mental health wellbeing programs has come about because society has shifted its views, especially in the workplace. It's no longer just the physical. So if we once were telling people how to adjust their ergonomic chairs, we're now helping people to adjust their mindset as part of preventative mental health strategies. So like physical health, this does not negate the individual's need to seek their own professional help and actions, but we have a duty of care to provide a safe environment in our workplace. And that is very much evident, I see, in the public sector. Resilience is a capability, for example, in the public sector capability framework, and it's necessary to deal with workplace challenges and demands. But we're slowly but surely focusing on organisational culture as well as the practicalities. It's no longer a tick the box exercise, and it's no longer a taboo topic where once it was, especially in a pandemic. But regardless of housing, for example, which is the agency that I work for, is mental health care. It's about freedom from abuse, breaking cycles of disadvantage, building or embracing your community. And that's why my agency exists. But at the same time, we now need to be focusing on our own people who build the houses for our clients. Now, working for a government agency, everyone knows it's quite bureaucratic, or it can be bureaucratic, has a lot of red tape, but where there is collective buy-in, there's always a way forward. And fortunately, I work in an agency where the senior leaders are very much human, and that makes a complete difference. So we've made leaps and bounds in government. In terms of the not-for-profit, I guess, and this isn't the case for everywhere, but in the agency that I worked for a couple of years ago, it was always about the passion, the thought process, the being kind to one another, because that's why, again, we existed. So it's always been inherent and evolving and adapting, but it's just been heightened, and the catalyst, I guess, has been COVID.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Nia. And Danielle, I'll come to you to kind of build on this. I mean, you sat on the board of the Australian Health Promotion Association, and you've worked with many corporates across many industries and disciplines to help change their behaviour and approach to mental health hygiene. So is this question about a workplace's role in mental well-being something that you've seen being asked for a long time and it's just being asked more now, or is it something that has really come from, more from left of centre very recently? How have you seen this over the last few years?
Yeah, Alex, I'll be giving away my age here, but 20 years ago, it was then that I sat on the board of Australian Health Promotion Association, and back then, workplace programs were well known, but we were looking at a 30-40% uptake. Now at AIA Vitality, we run Australia's Healthiest Workplace survey, and it's a free tool, but we offer the employers to complete a survey and employees to complete the survey. So we ask employers, what do you provide to your employees? And we ask employees, do you value that or do you use it? So what we've found is that over the years, more and more employees are providing more mental health activities. So EAP has always been something that's been on the list even 20 years ago. And that's still up at around the 85% mark. However, what we're finding now is that more and more employers are also providing mental health first aid training and other courses to identify and to identify mental health issues and also to increase the mental health literacy of their employees. So that's definitely a trend that we've seen throughout the years since 2017 that we've been running that survey, that corporates are definitely more aware of it. And they're more aware of it for a reason, because they're now more aware of the impact it has on the bottom line. So of course we want mentally healthy people and employees and society. However, it does actually impact on business productivity and business outcomes. So I think employers have to pay more attention now, regardless of whether they can see the direct impact themselves. It is actually having that impact on their bottom line.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you, Danielle. And Linda, to come to you finally on this part of the discussion. I mean, you've done extensive work on how psychological safety affects organizations and the well-being of their employees. So how have you seen this conversation about the role of workplaces in mental well-being, so actually what role they're playing, evolve over time?
It's been really exciting in the last 12 months to see this greater attention on psychological safety. I mean, we've seen Project Aristotle, Google did, started talking about psychological safety as the key ingredient in high-performing teams. And I guess what I'm noticing is that when I first started talking about psychological safety around 5 years ago, that people were quite frightened by the term and, kind of went, oh, gosh, we don't want to be looking at that, and we certainly don't want to be measuring it. I think there's much more of an appetite to look at it. And I guess people are starting to see that psychological safety is at the core of supporting people to perform at their best in the workplace. And it's actually a lead indicator. So when we talk about well-being at work, if people are feeling psychologically safe, then they've got a much greater chance of feeling mental health well-being at work. They're going to be more innovative. We also see that psychological safety is a lead indicator of people's engagement and a whole range of factors. So I think there's a greater attention on it now, which I'm incredibly excited about. And that's been, I think, escalated a bit through COVID, but not just through COVID. We've seen ISO 45003, which is looking at this concept of psychological safety. We've seen royal commissions that are highlighting the importance of psychological safety in the mental health services area. So I'm really thrilled to see that there's a greater focus on this, and we've had such a focus on physical safety in organisations. There's been a ton of work done in that area. It's now time to actually be focusing on psychological safety, and I think the companies that don't pay attention to this and don't try to positively influence psychological safety are going to end up in what I refer to as the psychological safety divide. The companies that pay attention to it are going to be the ones that perform. And as Danielle said, it does have such an impact on our bottom line. The ones that aren't paying attention to this are going to end up on the other side of the divide. And I think it means they're not going to be performing and that's going to be really awful.
Sure. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. And I think I'll throw this, there's no doubt that it's become a much bigger conversation, both internally within organizations and from their employees. But what we are seeing, and it certainly came out in the comments, is there's quite a disparity between what people are thinking and what people expect and what people want. So bearing that in mind in terms of what people want from their employers or their organizations, what do you think is the role of the workplace in mental well-being? What should they be doing, not doing? What's actually their role? And I'll throw that open to the whole panel. And if no one answers, I'll pick on someone. Okay, Danielle, I'm going to come to you. What do you think is the role?
Sorry, I was going to unmute, but I thought Dave was going to jump in. I think firstly, the employer's obligated to make sure that they've got a mentally and a physically healthy workspace. So I think besides the obligation, there's also the fact that as I mentioned already, that it contributes to their bottom line. But a productive workforce is obviously going to have a big impact on society as well. So what their role is to incentivize, to encourage and enable employees to be healthy. And I think we've seen companies do a really good job on the physical side. And now we're seeing that they're adapting and trying their hand at the mental health side as well. But mental health is definitely something that shouldn't be tackled in isolation of physical health, and we've looked at we've commissioned a lot of research, and we did some research last year with Quantium, a research house, and they found over 5 million members from one of our insurers that there was a lot of 70% of factors are for mental health illness. 70% of the factors are actually not controllable, and 30% are. So of that 30% that are controllable, one of them is physical activity. We've got sleep, diet, and obviously smoking and alcohol. But physical activity is directly correlated to mental health incidents. And we've found from that research that people who step more than 10,000 steps a day halve their risk of depression than those who step less than 2,000. So it's data points that really drive that correlation. It's not just mental health in isolation, it's actually the whole package. We know, and companies do well with physical health. Now we actually just need to marry them together and connect physical and mental health together. I mean, there's a lot of other data points there, looking at the number of minutes you exercise a day and the correlation between your body mass index, the correlating between number of exercise you do, minutes of exercise you do a day, and your mild symptoms of depression, and BMI and mild symptoms of depression. So we know there's that direct correlation. Now we just need to combine them together and get employers to adapt. And I think first aid training has been commonplace in workplaces. Normal physical first aid training that we all do, and now I think mental health first aid training. We need to make sure that employers are getting they almost need to have KPIs on how many people, you have your first aid warden on each floor, or in old days pre-COVID we used to all sit in offices and have a first aid warden on each floor. Now we need a mental health first aid warden, and not just on each floor, we need one in each team, so that we've got them being able to identify when they're seeing these signs and symptoms. So I do think that is an employer's responsibility to pick up on that, just to make sure that they're evening the physical and mental health services they're providing.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. Dave?
Yeah. Look, I 100% am a big believer in it, and I believe it is the role of the employer. We want high-performing teams. We want our businesses to succeed. We also know the constraints in the environment around us. And we need to understand that if you want a high-performing team, just like you have a high-performing athlete, it's not just about their physical needs, it's more so about their mental needs and their mental strength. And so I think for too long in the workplace, we haven't seen or looked at the people working in our teams from that angle, that they also are high performers. They're being asked to be on performance all day, every day. And there's just no way you can do this without some form of looking after self and creating an environment for self. What we also know and what we also look for is, if we're going to have a high functioning team, an innovative and a creative team, we also know that we need to have a diverse team. And this really plays into leadership and organizations, because if you're going to build very large, diverse teams, which we do know creates or brings creativity and innovation, you also need to make sure when this person turns up as their true, beautiful, diverse self, that their authentic self, that you've created an environment that they feel like they can be that person. And if you don't have a workplace that looks after and understands what it is to look after someone's well-being, and you don't break down those barriers that we used to have in the work world, no one can turn up as their true, authentic self. Or if they try to, they'll turn off pretty quickly because they just don't trust that they can. They don't trust those around them. So well-being has a much wider impact than I think a lot of us give it credit for. It's not about when someone might be overwhelmed and broken at a certain stage. It's about, this high performance. How do we build a diverse and inclusive team? And how do we set up an environment that allows them to turn up as their true, authentic selves?
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Great insight. Linda.
A couple of things, building a little bit on what Dave just mentioned around leadership. And if you think about some of the research that suggests that 75% of employees said the most stressful part of their job is their immediate supervisor. That starts to really question what are we doing in terms of building leadership capability. And when we think about some of the soft skills, that term really annoys me, because it's actually some of the most important skills that we need to be developing in leaders, because we know that leaders also influence the psychological safety and engagement of their team members by as much as 75%. So I think it really starts to put into question, what are we doing in terms of building leadership capability so that leaders can positively influence the psychological safety and in turn well-being of the people that they lead. And I think one of the things that we have to be really mindful of is that people will have existing mental health challenges. That's just, if you look at the population in your workforce, you will have people with existing mental health challenges. Now, I think the role of employers is to do no more harm. And when we're doing no more harm, it means that we're actually creating an environment for people where they thrive and they flourish. And so I think that needs to be a much greater emphasis. And I in a lot of the organisations I work with, they kind of seem to be struggle with, well, how do we equip people with the skills to positively influence psychological safety? And we're seeing a greater emphasis on things like showing vulnerability, situational humility, being authentic. So we really need to be highlighting these capabilities as absolutely critical right now if we're going to be supporting wellbeing, improving psychological safety, and improving performance.
Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. And Nia?
Yeah, so in my mind, there can be a fine line between genuine organisational concern for staff wellbeing and potential oversaturation as well. There's a risk that, an overzealous approach to promoting healthy wellbeing, mental wellbeing, can take away from the importance of it as well and potentially create cynicism. So there shouldn't be any compulsion for staff to participate in any wellbeing program or feel obliged to divulge personal information as well. So it's finding that balance. So when mental health wellbeing at work hinders other employees' safety and or others' mental health wellbeing, example, in the public sector, we've got mental health days that we could use. And so it's the obligation, I think, or responsibility of managers to be able to ensure that one person's issues are not passed on to someone else.
Cool. Okay, great. And that point you bring up about oversaturation and balance, I think, is something that is so important. And for anybody who is either on the journey, maybe at the start of the journey, or quite far down the journey of looking at a wellness program, a mental health program within their organization. what advice do you have? I mean, what are the things to look out for to ensure that you're getting that balance right? You know, what's too much? How do you define too much, and what's not enough? And that's open to anybody.
I think maybe I'll start off with some like the practicalities. A one size does not fit all approach, I think, and and so you find or you put into you create initiatives or programs that suit a wide variety of audiences. I mean, our employees, we've got about 160 plus, 650 plus across the whole of New South Wales, in regional areas, rural areas, with different backgrounds. And so, you know, being innovative in our programs in order to, for an employee to pick and choose, if you like, I think is really important.
Cool.
I was just going to jump in there and just mention that we have common human behaviours, and Vitality, the program that I work on, we look to focus on overcoming those common human behaviours and incentivising people to be healthy. And one of those common behaviours is over-optimism, that we as human beings overestimate our ability and we underestimate our risks. So this is just common human behaviour. I mean, it's testament every time you stand on the scales, you think the scales are broken. You think you're much lighter than the scales say, but that applies to a lot of parts of our lives. And some of the research shows that senior managers, while 1 in 5 employees will have a mental health condition every year, they don't think 50% of senior managers, when they were surveyed, actually thought that they would have to deal with a mental health problem. So I think this over-optimism that we all have as human beings, actually then you're seeing it manifest in the workplace, that senior managers are not expecting to have to deal with this. So I think that the first part of the puzzle is actually educating leaders and managers on the incidence and the likelihood that even if they're not aware of it, they are probably dealing with someone with a mental health issue, and make sure that they're armed and capable and confident to cater for what that person needs. So I think over-optimism for me is the first piece of the puzzle that needs to be addressed, and awareness and education is I suppose the tool to address that.
Great, thanks, Daniel.
Alex, I'd say, you know, one thing from me is, do we worry as much when mandating training across everybody must have training on our values or our customer care? Or if you're in sales training, we kind of don't sit here on a panel debating whether we're saturated there or whether someone needed that or not. So I don't think we're anywhere near saturation. And if the person sitting in on some sort of training around awareness and what mental health may look or feel like, which may be just 1 or 2 bad days, not a consistent period, and that me not being able to get through a brain fog of a day is also mental health, and not knowing the tools. I think as we do these trainings, I think we should make them, we should roll them out at mass. And will everybody need them at that particular point in time? No, it's like any sort of development and training. It's going to be there for hopefully a period of awareness, as and if and when they need it. But like anything, you can't be aware if someone isn't bringing something to your awareness or a tool set, you know. And I know I've had ups and downs through my corporate career, in high levels of stress where I had no idea what stress looked or felt like. I didn't have the terminology or language to put on it. And in fact, in corporate, you're kind of taught to be Superman or Superwoman and build a brand. And that brand never has problems. That brand isn't ever stressed. And that brand surely never shows any form of vulnerability. You know, so I think these things are important because there'd be a lot of leaders that still haven't had this awareness or this development that are hiding what they're going through on any form of just a small issue or not knowing how to get somewhere or a large issue. So for me, we still have a very long way to go for mass awareness of, you know, are these tools or practices I could use or put in place right now, just something that helps me with my awareness, or something that shows, hey, I can be a strong leader and I can also be vulnerable, and I can also open up about where I am in my journey so that others in the group also see that they also need to do something like this.
Great, thanks, Dave. And Linda, from your experience, how are you seeing this play out with leaders?
And one of the interesting things I'm noticing is that there is a greater awareness at board level of the need to be considering well-being of their employees. But what I'm seeing is that it's coming from board level, and board level is wanting a strategy around this, and then everyone scurries and dashes around and cobbles something together. You know, a few discounted gym memberships and a bit of mindfulness training without actually going, this is really important to spend some time developing a considered strategy, and a strategy that includes a whole range of elements and interventions that, you know, from mental health first aid training right through to building capability of psychological safety. And whilst I'm heartened to see boards starting to pay attention to this, it does concern me that that we're rushing into this without kind of seeing this is really important. We need to get this right. We need to go slow to go fast so that we can, you know, really deal with this in the best possible way. And I agree with comments from my fellow panelists. We definitely haven't reached saturation point because we're only just beginning on this journey, and I think we've got a really long way to go.
Cool. Okay, great. And on that then, so we can talk about, you know, the workplace's responsibility, and there's lots more that can be done, and it's a board level discussion, which is great and things. But what about the individual responsibility, and how much should workplaces put onto their employees to build their mental health literacy and their understanding? How does that play out? And Linda, I'll come to you then on that one.
Look, I think there is responsibility of an employer, and then there's also a responsibility as individuals to look after ourselves. And I think Danielle talked about, you know, there's tons of research about the importance of sleep, nutrition, activity, and also having a positive mindset. So I think it needs to be something that we support people to be paying attention to their own mental health and well-being, but also how are we supporting people to do that in the workplace? I'm hearing of people sitting in Zoom meetings, back-to-back meetings for 8 hours a day. You know, where is the time for people to have a break? And as leaders, we need to be actually modeling that behaviour and saying, okay, we're all going to get up and walk around for 15 minutes. And people are eating at their desks. So we're not really paying attention to modeling that behaviour, and then kind of almost putting in protocols so that we support people to be looking after their well-being in the workplace.
Cool. Dave?
Yeah, I think it's like most things, there's a joint responsibility on both points. It's not our job to direct that. Yet at the same time, if you open up these conversations, don't be worried, it comes pretty quickly. If you open up how you're feeling, do you feel valued, whatever the key trigger questions are, you'll pretty quickly get, no, I'm not feeling valued, or I'm working 12-hour days, or I'm in back-to-back video calls, as Linda said. It's like any, you know, you also need to, as a leader, push back and say, hey, we do, well, there's the first thing opposed from pushback, it's, you know, we do not expect you, and we do not want you to be working 12-hour days. We do not expect you or require you to work in back-to-back meetings. So first of all, there has to be a very clear communication that this isn't a badge of honor. Some of these things get thrown around of, oh, I was in, you know, how are you? The common answer is I'm busy. The next common answer is I was in back-to-back calls. Now, that is not what we expect from you as a leadership team, but there is a duty of responsibility on yourself to make sure you don't accept those meetings, to say no, to create those gaps. And so if it's our job to say we do not expect you to do it, it's also our job to make sure we allow people to create a safe space as a leadership team to go, hey, we need to give you the ability to look after yourself, to be able to say no, to be able to push back. But we can't push back on an individual's behalf. So there is this breaking down of these shared badges of honor. And I think one of the biggest and best ways to do anything like that is peer-to-peer, from a fellow peer as opposed to leadership to individual contributor, to say, hey, you know, maybe watch your language about this, or maybe don't be sending emails at night, or maybe Don't be saying your first common answer is I'm busy or I'm in these back-to-back meetings, just to watch and challenge these kind of old badges of honor that were, badges of success as well.
Sure, absolutely. And in my experience and, of watching this try to be rolled out across a number of businesses, one of the issues I think is being faced is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, Dave, I think it was yourself or it may have been Danielle, apologies, but is this thing about trust and trust in leaders to have the conversation so people will open up and admit vulnerabilities and talk about it and just face up to things. So how does an organization address that? Because that is a big thing.
I can say from our point, well, first of all, it needs to be, it's its own dedicated session in development. Like trust for me may mean something completely different for you. So a lot of people, I'll give trust until you've done something to tend for me to lose that trust. Others will not give trust until it's earned, So first and foremost, trust needs to, there needs to be development and understanding of trust. The second thing is I made that comment about if I'm turning up as my brand and I'm turning up basically as Superman, how can you trust me? Because you can't trust someone who's perfect. And if I'm turning up as Superman or Superwoman, I'm perfect. So vulnerability is key in that, to go, actually, you know what? I have had some struggles where I haven't been able to deal with stress. I did have to go and see a counselor about it. They gave me some amazing tools, which I now put in place. And, just by opening up on these small things about your own practices, it starts to also build something where, it's not that brand of Dave Wilson or it's not that Superman, but it's he is an individual, as a human being, as his true authentic self. But if you don't have people turning up as that true authentic self, which it can be hard because at work we've taught for many years to build our brands, we now need to reverse that and let go of our brands so people can trust us.
Cool. Okay, great.
I think it's an interesting balance, Dave, that you talk about, because we have had decades in corporate Australia, at least, where we've had to be tough, and now it's okay to be vulnerable and to be human and to actually speak the entire truth, so that people can relate to you a bit more and understand that you're not just the leader or the CEO. And Damien jokes that he's the chief entertainment officer. I mean, he tries to make himself more relatable to us in that way. But I think we're all having our own challenges now, that we have to find this way that we can still maintain some credibility and some respect while still being open and honest and relatable. And it's a tough balance, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's a balance where we have to make sure vulnerability does not equal weakness. You can be a vulnerable leader and someone who still has to every day make tough, hard calls on a regular basis, who has to make a decision. And one of the problems we have in this world is there's so much indecision and so much change. A leader who's also not making decisions without all the information we used to have, can be perceived as delayed or weak. But vulnerability, I think we have to be very clear in our development of leaders that vulnerability does not equal weakness, but not at all. And you can have a vulnerable leader is actually the opposite of a weak leader, but a very strong leader and confident in self. Not the same sort of leader who would also turn up and show and highlight the individual's performance or the team's performance over themselves. And I think that's where we need to get to.
Absolutely.
Just something to add to that. I think what's really interesting is, and I would agree, vulnerability does not equal weakness. But one of the things that I'm noticing that people are doing more in meetings, and I'm really happy about, a lot of us are still in Zoom meetings, is starting off your team meeting with just doing a check-in. How's everyone going? Because when people say, I'm feeling a bit stressed and overwhelmed, it gives the opportunity for other people to say, what can I do to help? So I think that that's really key. And I was just working with a group this morning that they've instituted doing a 2-minute mindfulness activity at the beginning of each of their team meetings. And this leader was relaying to me that after that, one of her staff came and said to her, I was feeling in a pretty bad place. I was really not doing okay. And I just want to say how valuable that was for me to then be able to be fully present and engaged in that meeting. So there are ways that we can incorporate small things that can make a difference to people's well-being in the workplace.
Great. Cool. We've got probably another 4 or 5 minutes of questions before we'll go to the audience questions. So if you do have any questions, please do make sure you get them into the chat function. But let's fast forward then 5, maybe 10 years. Where would you like to see workplace mental well-being get to? And I'll open that up to anybody.
I can
I'm going to pick on Nia then.
Okay.
Sorry, over to me.
Yes.
Someone said to me the other day, or I think I read it somewhere, that they said, you know, it would be amazing or quite futuristic if we allowed our staff to have, you know, 5-minute cat naps in the afternoon during the day, just to kind of have, you know, to rejuvenate ourselves. And when I think I read that, I started laughing, but then I thought, actually, you know, 5 minutes rest time, whether you're just closing your eyes or whichever, actually can make a difference. And so having that seen in the workplace as not slacking off or not, you know, not doing your work during business hours is acceptable practice. And so that's something, you know, that could be considered in the future, particularly in the public sector. That's still not, we haven't gone there yet. We haven't mentally changed our mindset to say, if we don't see you in your workstation between 9 to 5, you're not working. So yeah, something out there would be really amazing to see. And it's the norm as opposed to the exception to the rule.
Sure. Okay, great. Who else? Danielle, where would you like to see it get to in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I'd like mental health literacy to be one of the KPIs that businesses track. And again, as Naya says, not the exceptional business, but all businesses track mental health literacy and capability as well, with perhaps the mental health first aid as a metric. So I think that's the first thing for mental health to be reported at board level and tracked at that level. But I think we also need to adapt to post-COVID world, and we've learnt some great workplace practices through being forced into these situations. So I think we're going to be looking at a world where we continue the parts that have worked and perhaps drop those parts that haven't. So a hybrid flexible working policy in all corporates would be great, or workplaces where people can choose their hours at work and home, and perhaps a 3-2 hybrid model of in the office and at home. And I think what would be great, I'm not sure if it's possible, but what would be great is mandating, or as many companies as possible, to mandate smaller meetings. So at AIA, for example, instead of a 30-minute meeting, we have 25-minute meetings. Instead of an hour meeting, we have a 45-minute meeting. And that way you get that micro stress relief every 30 or 60 minutes. So it's those little things that can help, and perhaps more obvious productivity training. So I think Dave mentioned before that making sure that you're in control of your diary and that you take responsibility as an individual employee of not being in back-to-back meetings, so that you can not, when you open up your Outlook in the morning, that you're not going straight to your inbox. You're actually going straight to your calendar to say, look, I'm not meant to be looking at my inbox now. I'm meant to be focusing on something else right now. And I know we've got all of these tools that are actually forcing us to do that. So I've got focus time blocked into my diary sometimes, and Outlook is automatically doing it for me. So I think we're already starting that journey. The software's ahead of us. It's starting the journey for us. But I think for that to be more commonplace, and productivity training, people to take personal responsibility for that would be great in the future.
Cool. Thank you, Danielle. Dave?
I believe, and maybe I'm lopsided on it because I'm such a big believer in it, but I think it's going to be completely immersive inside performing companies. So I don't think anybody's going to grab it, but to Linda's point, there will 100% be a divide between those who don't adopt and have this not just adopted but fully immersive versus not. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But as I said, we just know now you can't have an innovative, high-performing team without also hand-in-hand having a team that has good mental health conversations, practices, tools being provided to them continually, not one-off, but continuous development. So I can see that companies also already understand that. Also, they're going to be held accountable because it's going to be a large part of the criteria or measurement of success on whether I join a company. Like most people now have that as foremost on what are your well-being practices, what does this look like, what hours can I work? Companies like ours have just decided that it's everybody's choice, and there's over 65,000 of us, whether we work from home or where we work from. It's work is not where we go, but what we do. And so these things are going to be critical in these environments where you can't see someone face to face. Trust is going to be super critical, which is a big part of this, and just people being feeling safe and having the tools around them. So I think, high performing companies, it'll be completely embedded into their day-to-day operations. If not, they won't be high performing.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Dave. And before we go to audience questions, Linda, to kind of wrap it up, I think your mission is to change the world one brain at a time. So where would you like to see it get to in 5 or 10 years?
I agree with what the fellow panelists have been saying. I think I'd like to see it embedded. I think I'd like to see psychological safety treated with the same importance as physical safety, and that it's a key metric upon which people are measured. And I'd also like to see it just embedded in capability development frameworks. If you think about, people are promoted generally because they're good at their job or they have technical expertise, but then we don't give them the handbook on how to lead people. So I think when we see a much greater emphasis on building capability to, technically do the role well, but also to be thinking about how do I support my team members to remain socially and psychologically safe. So embedded, I think we need to be measuring it, and for it to have the same importance placed upon it as physical safety. So we saw quite a significant move in that direction for a number of years. We talked about zero harm, but we want to bring a balance. We really, obviously people need to be physically safe, but what are we doing to make sure that they're psychologically safe so that they do flourish and thrive at work and have a great sense of workplace wellbeing.
Cool, great, thank you. And that brings me quite nicely onto a question from Tamara, actually, where she asks, what type of KPIs are businesses tracking to understand how psychological safe they are and highlight areas of concern? So maybe what KPIs have been maybe tracked in your business or businesses that you work with and that you've seen have been particularly effective?
So, I can speak from our part. I know we track we track some of the things that are like, say, root causes for not operating at those environments of, so fear we know is detrimental to this. So we will track and we will survey and ask if people are feeling fear. We'll also, with other questions around that, ask if they feel like they have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. And so we'll go in through a lot of these, and we're still building these out, to be honest, but they're getting richer and richer every day. And these aren't, to Linda's point, anything that we would call soft KPIs anymore. These are as critical KPIs as your financial targets for the quarter. If you can show up in your measuring of an organization that you have some of your key leaders and or individuals or areas that feel like they're at a place of stress and don't feel they have the coping mechanisms, and you overlay a couple of these KPIs, you're going to have a spiraling effect through those organizations. So you need to be able to monitor it. So we're building these up day to day. I know, some of the work with companies like Mentemia are doing exactly the same thing, educating and building up KPIs and measurement tools for these sort of companies so they can understand the same as what Linda's doing.
Cool, great. Thanks, Dave. What other KPIs are people measuring in their organizations or are they seeing?
And I think one of the key things is actually that we're measuring psychological safety at a team level. So Conductor Software, a company that I co-founded, one of the things that we noticed was that people weren't measuring psychological safety at the team basis. But not only that, we actually then need to actually link it with KPIs to show the very strong relationship between psychological safety and business results. And what I notice in a lot of companies is they're focusing on things like revenue, and revenue is a lag, that's right down the very end. So what are we doing to measure some of those other lead indicators that sit alongside psychological safety, so that we're also providing a very strong business case to invest in building capability in psychological, supporting psychological safety in the workplace.
Okay, all right, great. And I've got another question here from Matthew, and this goes back to about people leaders. And it's, how do you paint a practical picture to people leaders around what ideal model behavior looks like? So I guess this is coming back to training and looking at our leaders who are humans themselves. If we want them to look at and to get to a point or to operate in a certain way, how do you paint a practical picture to these people leaders so they know what ideal looks like?
I guess, the first is every leader has a leader. So it's by example. You just look at our kids. If you've got them, you can't say, do as I say, not as I do. So, first of all is lead by example, and that, there's a lot of talk out there without then your leader turning up with their S on their chest still. That isn't going to work. People see through that. But let's also understand that a lot of these leaders aren't in a pace of awareness right now. It hasn't hit them on their journey in their career or their personal life where they might not have come across anything like this. So there has to be a period of bringing leaders up to speed on, what does, first of all, you can't help anybody if you can't help yourself. If you don't have the tools to put the oxygen mask on self first, then you're expecting too much of those leaders. So first and foremost, we develop our leaders really strongly to understand what it looks like to put oxygen mask on self first. If you can understand the signs and signals yourself of what, stress looks like, or early signs of stress or anxiety or depression or fear, you can start to recognize it in other people. But yeah, I think too often we forget about the oxygen mask needs to be on self first, or you're not helping that very first mind of yours and your leadership team.
Cool. All right, great. Thanks, Dave. Has anybody else got anything to add to that?
I think building on what Dave said, I think putting your oxygen mask on first is really, really critical, and it's about developing self-awareness and self-regulation skills. Every leader needs to start there. In terms of, a picture that makes sense to people, I know that leaders don't generally walk into a room and say, I want to stress out 75% of my staff. Most people come from good intentions. It's actually about a lack of awareness. So as we build awareness around some of the simple things that leaders can do to improve wellbeing, improve psychological safety, then I think that people will start to see the benefit. And when I say to leaders, what would it be like if people stopped coming to you with their problems, and that they were working with their teams? I say, oh, that'd be great. It'd give me back another 5 hours of my day. So it's really about actually painting for people what might be the benefits of working in a way where we're focusing much more on a human-centered kind of approach to the work that we do.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I am conscious of time, and we have run over a little bit. So we do have quite a few more questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get through all of those. But panelists, thank you from me. That was absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to hand back to Tanya. And there she is, right on time. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Alex, and a huge thank you to AIA Vitality and Mentemia for pulling together such a fantastic discussion on this burning and timely topic. Huge thanks to the panelists as well for taking the time to share all of your expertise and insights with us today. And thanks to you, Alex, for being an excellent moderator of the discussion. A reminder that we have one more webinar in the series for you that will be delivered right here in 2 weeks' time on the 17th of August, same time, same place. And a reminder that Workplace Wellness Festival 2022 will be returning to a face-to-face delivery at the ICC in Sydney, 22nd and 23rd of June 2022. We have a fantastic early bird offer on tickets, so make sure you get in early to secure your spot at Australia's largest workplace wellness gathering. Thanks again to the almost 1,000 of you who have registered for this webinar today. Wishing you all lots of little daily joys as we continue to navigate these COVID challenges together. Please remember to keep checking in on each other, and goodbye from me.